Hello, welcome to the second lecture of this course on social change and globalization. In this second lecture, I will introduce the concept of human development, which is one of the main concerns of global governance nowadays. Actually, maybe you know that in 2015, a wide array of parties or stakeholders signed a series of agreements on the Sustainable Development Goals, which are expected to, which the world should meet by 2030, in 10 years' time, 15 years at the moment of the signature. Well, this wide set of targets can be defined as sustainable development or human sustainable development. It has to do with human capabilities as well as with environment and the interaction between both of them. This will not, I expect this is not such a long presentation as the previous one because I will complement it with some statistics that we will observe or we will visit online altogether. Even though we cannot have an on-site class because of the special circumstances, I will look for the way to share these statistics with you in a more amusing mode than simply recording myself. Human development has to do with long or the very wide philosophical tradition that basically links social justice with human capabilities, human basic capabilities. Unfortunately, depends on your interest. This is not a course on philosophy, so I will skip the debate and I will present it in a very concise way as the components of the Human Development Index. The United Nations Development Program developed the Human Development Index in the 1990s in order to show development that does not only depend on the gross domestic product, but also on other social aspects that have to do with welfare or with human capabilities. One of them is schooling or enrollment rate, so the percentage of children who actually attend a school. That's literacy. Another one is literacy, the percentage of adult people who are able to write their own name. And the final one is life expectancy, which is basically the average age of the people who die in a country in a given year. Philosophical underpinnings of human development have to do with the work of philosopher John Rawls and philosopher and economist Amartya Sen and philosopher Martha Nussbaum. John Rawls argued that social justice, we need a normative theory of social justice. A normative theory is a theory about how reality ought to be. Is a theory about what an ideal world would be, but it's a systematic and rationally or very rigorously developed theory. It's not just dreaming, but it's trying to get to the conclusion from very clear premises. Working in this very deductive way, John Rawls tried to develop a social justice normative theory that defined universally and morally valid criteria to distribute primary goods. I will not go into the criteria. Maybe if you had a course on social justice, you know some of them and how they have to do with liberties and with some sort of positive discrimination. This is not the point here, or I don't have time to elaborate on that. I want to focus on mostly to focus on the concept of the primary goods. Simon Nussbaum claimed that key primary goods are many, but we have to distinguish the key ones. We need many things to go on with our lives, but we have to distinguish the key ones, and the key ones are those which contribute to human flourishing by enacting basic capabilities. In English, The verb flourish develops a very nice metaphor with, to my understanding, it is a metaphor with flowers which flourish in a given time every year and get the best potential. So human beings are always supposed to become more human. The more we can develop our basic capabilities, the more we can live, the more we can learn, the more we can build just arrangements with one another. So and Sena Nussbaum claimed that we need to focus on these basic capabilities in order to make sense of justice and human development. So the point nowadays is not only how much is the GDP per capita throughout the world, but to what extent people can actually develop their capabilities in all the countries and all the regions of the world. Over time, variations in the distribution of these primary goods, of course, significant social changes. And we also have to be aware of the mechanisms that produce these changes, which are not only related to global governance. In the following lecture, we will discuss some of these mechanisms according to the literature on socioeconomic development. In this following lecture, we will mostly focus on socioeconomic development, so on the evolution, on the evolution of the GDP, of the gross domestic product in a wide array or a wide variety of countries. But in this lecture, I want to focus on other aspects that you will also, on which you will also work in following in the reading list when reading the articles that I propose to you, and in the workshop on demography that is included in this course. So, and a key aspect has to do with life expectancy. How many years we are expected to live according to the conditions in our country right now. This is a key aspect of global health, and unfortunately or significantly, this is one of the key trending topics in 2020 because we are living a global pandemic. Anyway, I don't want to talk about a pandemic right now. We can do that, and we will have plenty of occasions to do that. But I was just to sketch a key concept that is important to make sense of how many years we live. This is the concept of the demographic transition, that is the change between different demographic regimes that have mostly taken place in the world during the three last centuries. So we have a kind of traditional regime where many people are born, but many people die at a very early age. The high birth and high death rates. Then population is stable at the tragic cost, but is stable. The total volume of population does not significantly change. That was the state of humanity for thousands of years. But we have a second stage where population explodes. There is a population boom. And this normally has taken place in many countries because death rates declined at the same time as birth rates were higher. That's the baby boom, or that's the demographic revolution in many countries. It started in some European countries in the late 18th century, but it has been stretching throughout the world for the last 200 and plus years. Finally, we get to in many countries we are at a new regime where both birth and death rates are low. And so population is stagnant again, or is even decreasing if death rates, if birth rates are significantly low, below, score below replacement thresholds. It is important to notice that Besides the demographic transition, many countries has always experienced an epidemiological transition to the extent that most deaths were the consequence of exogenous infectious diseases some centuries ago, but no longer. In the last decades, the most prevailing, the most influential causes of death are endogenous diseases that are the consequence of a lifestyle of the development of the human body. That's an important point. I think it's important that we discuss this in the current year, because actually the COVID pandemic does not make a difference in that. But of course, it reminds us that there is not a straightforward line, but we have to be aware of how different realities interact with each other. We will read Preston's curve in the graphic. You have the graphic in your model room. I will not go into the details, and we will read an article on that. Preston's curves have to do with the relationship between life expectancy and GDP over time. We will take some time to look at it. Let me very briefly remind you of the main dimensions of educational development, or education as a phase or a dimension of human development. One of them is literacy and literacy. To what extent are we able to conduct the basic operations of or to use language and abstract languages for our everyday life? The traditional measure of literacy has to do focused on signature and being able to write your own name. But now we have some official statistics that actually broaden the scope of what functional literacy is. Anyway, the point is that in low-income countries, many more people are illiterate than in higher income countries. We will visit the United Nations wide database, and we will also look at some stats of that. The OECD PIAC, which is another survey of adult capabilities, has also shown how there are variable intergenerational shares of low levels of functional literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving competencies in Europe, Western Europe, North America, and Japan. So if we compare the highest development countries nowadays, we find significant variations regarding literacy. So there are many questions arising there. We have to be aware. We have to be aware that there is a correlation with GDP, but this is not the whole story. Many other factors are at stake. An encompassing and international sociological research, CAMSIS, has convincingly proved since the 1990s that school expansion did not guarantee equal opportunities throughout the 20th century. Drawing on John Goldthorpe's, and sociologist John Goldthorpe's method for analyzing social mobility, these sociologists have looked for the relationship between parental occupation, individuals' educational level, and individuals' education, and they have found out that there have not been expansive equal opportunities for the 20th centuries anywhere. So the region, the parental occupation, has maintained strong influence despite all the changes, of the social changes that many different countries have undergone for the 20th century. Finally, the OECD PISA exam, which is normally delivered at 15-year-old students in many countries, has also convincingly shown how socioeconomic status and social segregation pattern the distribution of academic performance in a wide variety of countries, both in high income and middle income countries. There are some economists claim that it's interesting to look at human capital to the extent that there are significant correlations between education and GDP. We will look at the details. I just want you to be aware that human capital has to do with these correlations, and we will go into the details afterwards. I want to close with this very interesting diagram in my view, which I constructed drawing on the economist Robert Fogel, did this article by economist Robert Fogel, because this diagram shows that there is a interaction between human capital or education stock, a health capital or a health stock, so that education is not isolated. It's deeply related to a number of factors which have to do with technology, but also have to do with physiological improvement of human beings, depending on the conditions we live in. That interacts with health quite significantly. There are plenty of studies showing how education can become a capital to the extent that helps us to conduct a healthy life. But you also have to be aware that weak health is also an important barrier for learning and for education. And that's an important factor in many countries, and it's an important factor even in the wealthiest countries of the world, if we take into account some important processes of social exclusion and mental health. Well, that's it, and I will finish here. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this presentation was interesting for you. Stop recording.